Narcissistic people move rapidly. The alacrity at which they sort of engage, invest into the relationship is really, really stark. They will, for instance, say on the first or the second date, they would have already fully invested in internally, emotionally, with the idealized snapshot they took of you whenever they first met you, which they have brought in and merged with internally against the false self, which is now in battle. False version of mother that they hold internally to keep themselves safe, which is very harsh and critical, very, very hyper vigilant and paranoid and angry. And this cycle of sort of love bombing at the start, which is really there to convince the narcissist that you are the one. But what that does to us, it gives us grandiosity and narcissistic supply. So we get a feeling of what it's like to be them. They give us a glimpse of the shared fantasy. We get addicted to that cycle. Because they've been using cold empathy, reflexive and cognitive empathy, it looks normal because their facial expressions look just like ours. And it seems like they're taking it on board because they've got the cognitive empathy behind it. So they can sort of think it through, but they've no effective empathy, so they cannot sit in your position and truly feel how you feel. So, in other words, it's fake. It's not real. Your pull is towards love and connection. Their pull is towards grandiosity and avoidance. Once we get stuck in this cycle, you'll notice with the narcissist that they will get something in the diary really, really quickly. You can end up booking something in the future. It could be a concert, it could be a weekend away, it could be a holiday, it could be whatever it is, but it'll move incredibly quickly. The next thing you know, you're making plans to move in with them. The narcissist always wants something. They always want something to gain out of the relationship. So you could be paying half their bills, half their rent, but at the same time, you're getting intermittently reinforced, met with cold empathy for them to work out what's gone on within you throughout your life. As we give those things away, as they watch our reactions and take it in. And then as the relationship goes on and we cause this narcissistic injury, because we're not going to be congruent with the internal idealized snapshot they took of us. So therefore there's this frustration now going on between the internal vision and the external object, us. And it's no longer matching. And the only way the narcissist can bring this back to themselves is to reinstate grandiosity. So they must now insult, they must devalue the partner in order to reinstate that internal feeling of superiority and grandiosity. However, because they live in an internal world, external objects are part of them. You are just an extension of them. And therefore, whenever they're devaluing you, they're devaluing themselves. So they start creating this ever widening gap between you, the external object, and the internal idealized object. And it is now starting to get further away from the false self. It is no longer becoming congruent. So, what the narcissist does is they coerce you on the outside to try and get you to behave again like the internal object. Because after a devaluation, which is really an internal discard, the narcissist will love bomb you again, the external object, to bring that internal object that they hold with pure idealization internally within them back up to where it needs to be for them to feel grandiose and omnipotent. Then over time, because you've been devalued, because there's now this grandiosity gap between the false self and the internal object, and you, the external object, which are just a mere regulator of that internal object, this means that the cycles of devaluation now start to get more and more frequent as we become less and less congruent with the internal fantasy because we're now starting to become reactive because they've been projectively identifying themselves on top of you. So you're now starting to be more narcissistic. They have been living vicariously through us. They have synced their brainwaves. They know how we're going to react to things. They have been flipping the ego states all the time, putting us down into our child ego, which into our early childhood trauma, and they are now fighting with us as children, and we're being chastised by the internal, harsh, critical mother, an imprint of the original mother who abused them in the first place. The narcissist will adopt mother figure themselves and project out what mother is saying inside. You see, because the narcissist does not have conversations with us, they only have internal. Because there's no separateness with the narcissist between themselves and external objects. So they could get very confused about internal and external conversations because the separateness of them and you is non existent. There is no separateness. They don't see you as a separate, independent, autonomous being. And this devaluation cycle, eventually you will get so fragmented, you get so far away from the idealized object. And the narcissist now must turn you into a persecutory object. Discard is coming. And you'll have noticed this in the relationship because the argument levels, the tit for tat levels, would have started ramping up, would have started getting more and more and more as they started getting more and more separated away from you, as they start separating themselves away from the internal object that represented you. The discard comes and they get rid of that persecutory internal object at the end by trying to hand it off back to you so you accept all the badness that has been projectively identified into you. We're in such confusion. We're no longer in cognitive dissonance. We're in a split. We're starting to see ourselves incredibly badly and we're starting to idealize the narcissist and wonder what's wrong with us. We are merely emotionally reacting to a lot of internalized beliefs that have been projected into us. And we've also taken on ourselves based on our own perception of the external environment, based on how we feel internally. And that is based on the relationship and the projections that have been going on within it. We need to reject that persecutory object that we have accepted from the narcissist. We need to refuse that internally. And that means we need to deprogram the abuse out of your mind. And the only person who's going to give that to you is Professor Sam Bachman. I can tell you because I've deprogrammed my own mind using his work. It works. Trust me, everything I've just told you there is his teachings. Everything. It's a lot more complex than that. That's a very simplistic view of the love bombing, devaluation, discard. The process that you went through in this narcissistic relationship, they all follow the same pathological pattern because it's an object relations failure with mother. They have failed to separate and individuate, and they are on a repetitious compulsion of finding external objects to internally, fictionally represent an idealized version of mother they never had in order to separate from it, in order to frustrate it, in order to to escape these internal persecutory voices that stay within them. They have introject permanence and they lack object constancy, which means all the internal voices stay and the external objects are there to be gotten rid of. I hope that makes sense, but understand narcissistic abuse is about using an external object in order to merge, fuse, frustrate, devalue, discard, and separate it from. Peace out. Loads of love.